Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We certainly have a perspective, and we have a personality up here this morning. He's too straight and honest to be a politician. So, with apologies to my politician friends out there.
Have you seen that ad on television where the lady says that she doesn't think that she trusts the politicians to take care of this constituency? She thinks they maybe take care of themselves first. Yeah.
Diogenes, put away your lamp. You found an honest person. Let's get serious and introduce our guest this morning. We're going to a lot of trouble to bring this man in. Brought him all the way from
Florida.
Yes, right.
I tell you, I hunted him down, didn't I?
Well, I appreciate being here, and thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you. We have read your second book, The Road to Floradixie. Now, I was really impressed.
What's the gentleman's name?
I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, okay.
No, really, it would be fair to tell you. Tom Brewster, he wrote The Hung Jury, which we said was wonderful. But this was almost even better, if that's possible. And it's about two policemen. Did you pattern that after somebody you hung around with all those years?
Not in this book. You know, I did pattern people in the first book, The Hung Jury, after some of the policemen I knew. But this book, I totally...
But that was a local episode.
Right, it was local. But I totally came up with these characters out of my imagination. And one of the characters, Rudy Campbell, was actually one of my favorite characters that I ever had, you know, and he was really easy to write about. And he was one of the two police officers. He was less serious, you know, overweight, had all kinds of, problems. And the other guy was more down to earth, a little quicker on the draw. But Rudy was actually my favorite character that I wrote about.
How do these characters evolve in your mind? And do they become people pretty quick?
They do.
Good question.
When you write about things, you take into consideration all of your experiences in life, and you might not even remember the characteristics that you're writing about might have belonged to somebody that you knew at some point in time. So you give them a little bit of activity, and pretty soon it starts to develop, and you kind of stick with that personality all the way through. And finally, when you get down the line, you're writing and you want to bring this character in, you think, well, what would he do? Because you've already decided who he is and how he reacts to things, and you think, well, he wouldn't react like that, he'd react like this. And so that's the way you write it. You know, after you start to build this character, pretty soon that character becomes more alive to you than just sitting down trying to make things up. You're thinking, well, how would Rudy do? What would Rudy do in this situation? And so you write like that, and you come up with
we ought to tell the name of this book, too, because we're going to try and sell that book.
Well, yeah, it's called The Road to Floradixie. I thought I said that. Did I say that?
I think so. Well, I was out in left field at the time. Again, sitting here thinking about it.
But at any rate, it is The Road to Floradixie, and it's a dandy.
Tom has a very facile mind, and he has a way of... He'll take a small little snippet of something going on in his action in his book, and he has a way of weaving a story around that little isolated snippet. And Tommy, you're just an excellent writer. I would commend it. It's quick reading. You certainly don't have to do a lot of concentration on it while it's enjoyable reading. He weaves a story about these two dudes that are out on the search for this guy, and it leads them down into the deep south. And it's a well-written, well-crafted book. I was impressed as I read it, as I said, by just taking little snippets of information and making a story unto itself, just around that little bit of information. Now, Am I correct? I believe you said that you started this new career as a result of attending Lincoln College's writing courses.
Exactly.
Am I correct in that?
Right.
See, a kudo to Lincoln College for that.
Well, the story.
Now, tell us the story about why you went up there.
Well,
that was all. I thought that was interesting.
You know, I was a young policeman. I was on the police department in Lincoln, and Chief Floradixie, under the influence of Roger Thompson. Roger Thompson was a stickler for getting details into a police report. And John Floradixie sent us all to Lincoln College to take a class out there in report writing.
So Roger would be proud of you.
And I worked for Roger even after I left the police department.
Did you?
Because him and I were really pretty good friends. But anyway, we went to this class, and all the policemen took it, and when we finished, the instructor said, you know, just give yourself whatever grade you think that you deserve. And so Bob White and I worked together, and we'd sat and we'd said, what do you think you deserve? And I said, well, probably a C. And he said, well, I think I probably got a C too. So we both gave ourselves C's in grade. By the way, it's the only C I ever got at Lincoln College. And anyway, 4 or 5 days later, the chief called me into his office, and he says, what's going on with this class out there at the college? He said, were you goofing off, or what? Can you explain that? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, everybody out there besides you and Bob White got an A, and you two came up with a C.
Oh, heck.
So I explained it to him, and he told get out of my office, you know. I really liked John Floradixie. He was a really good, hard-working chief of police.
Good egg, you bet. Well, you know, your career kind of morphed into this, I should think, naturally, because in your career you had an opportunity to meet the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes, and sometimes the good and the bad and the ugly are not always as they appear either, you know, because superficially that's the way that we met people on the police department. We get a call on somebody at, in some kind of family disturbance, and we show up and we're seeing the worst of the people probably at that point in time.
I'm sure.
And they may be the greatest people on earth, and as you get to know them along the way, you might find out, hey, I was really wrong about making a judgment on this person. Might have been the worst occasion of their lives that they had to have a policeman stand there telling them what they need to do, you know, and how they needed to behave. So I always tried to look at it like that, and as I found out over the years, I was right. You know, I've seen people that were just at their worst that turned out to be really good people.
We should all take a page from that book of yours.
Well, you know, I know a lot of cops, and I think that's the way most of them view things. You know, they take their jobs pretty seriously, and I'm really a supporter. I've been different things a lot longer than I was a cop, but I still think of myself as an old cop, and I really believe that these guys are out there doing the best for everybody, and I support them with everything that I got. You know,
I'll tell you something we don't take seriously enough, and that is our obligation to our sponsors. We get into this program, Tom, and we get going, and the first thing you know, it's 15, 20 minutes into the program, we haven't honored our sponsors. We're going to do that right now. Go right ahead, Mr. Ash. And right back live in the studios here at WLCN, high on the hill on County Road 2250.
We don't even have a hill in Logan County. What are you talking about, high on the hill?
Anyway, Viewpoint, of course, is the program appearing each Wednesday morning at 08:15 to 0900 hours. The programmer Judy Busby and the old fella try to bring you guests. Mostly all they're local, and today we're very happy to bring back an author. We had Tom Brewster in before when he wrote the first book about a local slayings plural, and that was an excellent book. And now he's written a novel called The Road to Floradixie. And as I said to him earlier, and I say again on air, he's an excellent writer. He takes little things that's a part of his story, and he'll weave a story around the story. And that takes a little special talent. I'd like to sell that book. Unfortunately, we don't have a bookstore in town anymore, do we? Do we have any place that sells books? Boy, somebody call in 648-5510 and let us know if you sell books in your store.
Now, you're going to be having a book signing, too.
Flossie's and Denzel's uptown right there on the corner.
Nice little eating place on the corner.
We don't, but it's like I said, we don't have the books. But the books are supposed to get here.
Where's your publisher located, Tom?
In New York City.
In New York City?
Yeah, Beacon Publishing Group in New York City. But like I said before, that's still their address, but they're trying to move to North Carolina because business is just too hard to do in New York, according to my publisher. So they're moving to a new location, and that's part of the reason why the books are not, readily available like they should be. But we're going to have this book signing, and when we do, I'll let you know. And you can
maybe we can have a roving reporter on the side. Of course, it's difficult now. COVID has made such an impact on everybody, every place, that nothing is constant anymore. So events are coming up in the community that you have to limit attendance to and so forth. That's it's a bad thing, but that's the way it is. But we'd like to be sure and talk about that when we get the book signing set up and invite people to come in and have a cup of coffee or whatever. And maybe we can make it at the Spirited Republic.
There you go.
Well, I'll sure let you know.
So, how long were you in the process of writing this book, Mr. Brewster?
Well, I read stories about people that write books, and it takes them a year or 5 years to write a book, or 2 years or something like that. I started writing, and I'm done within like a month and a half.
Really?
Does it take on a life of its own or something?
I think it does, yeah. I think, like I was saying earlier, that you come up with a character, and you sort of take ordinary situations and you exaggerate that situation, then you exaggerate your response to it, and when you get through writing it, it doesn't seem so exaggerated. It seems kind of interesting. So I try to keep it like that, to expand on it. And I read about other authors all the time because I'm kind of fascinated with them. I sure don't put myself in the same category as people like
I'll vote for you in that category.
They do. Gresham, like I've read about him, he does an outline from beginning to end, and he sticks with it. But whenever I've written my books, I don't have any outline. I just sort of build on what I started with, and like I said, I come up with these situations, exaggerate the situation, then exaggerate the response, and that's the way I do it. And I don't sit down and write in an office. It's like I said before, my wife and I like to be in the same room. We've been together for 50 years, but we still like to be in each other's company, and so she'll watch TV, and I'll sit down on the couch, and I'll just get my computer, and I'll start writing on my computer, and we sit there and maybe not speak for hours, but we're in the same room together.
Well, that's called
we're doing
togetherness
different things.
in its own form.
Yeah.
Tom, when you go to bed at night, do you find yourself writing?
Sometimes I'm thinking
You're
about
mentally
it.
going through a plot or a portion of the book that you left off when you went to bed, and you want to flesh that out and finish it. Do you find yourself doing that?
I find myself, that, and I'll reread it several times. I'll write it, and then I'll reread it, and I'll change things, but I'll be laying in bed some night thinking about things that I've written, and I'll think, boy, that was trash. I really need to fix that.
You have to be your own best critic.
And so then the following days I'll go back and I'll fix it up, or I'll change it, or sometimes I just delete it. When I wrote The Hung Jury, it was twice as long as what I published, because I eliminated probably half of it before it was over. So, because I'd read it and I think that doesn't fit with the rest of the book, or that was uninteresting, or that was poorly written, and I would just delete it and then try to hook it back up with the chapters that I'd written before, and so it was twice as long as what was published when I started.
But to me, it flowed so nicely. There was nothing in there that was over the top.
It was a story.
It just came along nicely. And I'm an avid reader. I absolutely am. Books are my favorite thing in the world. And
there went you and I, Jim.
well, next to you and Jim. And I just thought it flowed so beautifully. And by the same token, the road to Floradixie just was like you were really reading a news story about these nice policemen.
Yeah. Well, when I don't want to pat myself on the back
go
or
right
sound
ahead.
too,
Hey.
It's our show. You go right ahead.
too caught up with me. But when I write these things, the hardest part of it is the transition. Like you've got a story that you go through, and it's sort of an individual story, but you want the next chapter to actually fit into the book. So when you make that transition, usually the first part of it's a little dry because you want to be informative and you want to hook it up with what you've already written before you actually get into writing the rest of it. And the transition where you go from one chapter to another, or one point of view to another, or one action to another, that's where I have to work at it. But once I get into it, it's not work for me. I mean, I'm just sitting there writing, and it's flow of consciousness that gets me through it.
Do you have an idea going into it how it's going to end?
I always want them to end, on a good note. I hate to read a book to the end and then I hate it because it had such a terrible ending. So I write them with the impression that I've got an ending for it, and the rest of it, I'm going to find a way to get to that ending. And pretty much that's the way I've done it so far, because, like I said, if nothing irks me more than to read a Stephen King book that's got 700 pages, and at the end of it, you don't have any idea what went on, So I try to have a good ending and a nice ending that people can live with and have kind of a warm feeling about it. So,
well, in fact, you did that very thing on the road to Floradixie. I thought you brought it together nicely. Yourself as you're working on a particular plot or a part of the story.
I do. I've written a book that I called The Confession. I found out since then there's already a book by that name, but I've written 300 pages, and I came to a point where I can't write the people out of the terrible situation they're in. I mean, without making them look like awful people, and I don't want to do that, so I just
Scrap that idea.
Yeah, I just stopped. I just quit. I thought I can't get out of this, so I just stopped. But
well, what happens next then?
Yeah, really, what happens next? I can't. It's like Bill said, I lay there in bed sometimes at night thinking, how can I get these guys out of this mess they're in? And so far, I haven't been able to do it. So that happens, but it didn't happen with me on the road to Floradixie. I mean, everything went really well, and I never had a point where I thought I can't go on with this because I don't like what I'm writing, because I did like what I was writing, and so I finished it up and pretty much like that.
I found myself in a position of wanting to say certain things, and I do it at night. And then I wake up in the morning, now let me see, what was that? I'm trying to, because while I was laying there with my head on the pillow, I thought, well, that sounds good, we'll do that. Well, heck, that morning that had disappeared somewhere. I had to look under the pillow and see where that idea went.
I have that all the time. Sometimes when I'm driving in my car, if I come up with an idea where I want to go with something, I'll write it down, because I've had so many occasions where I thought, well, that would really work really well in a book or in a chapter or something like that. And then I'll get to where I'm going. I think I really had something worked out in my head a while ago, and now I can't remember it. So I've got a pad in my car. I just write it down.
A short pencil's better than a long memory, isn't it?
It is.
The readers might want to know a little bit about publishing. How does one go about publishing a book, Mr. Brewster?
Well, the first book that I had published was called The Great American Novel, and that my daughter took care of all that. She found
Allison did that?
Yeah, I think I told that story before, that I'd written the book The Hung Jury whenever I was 28 years old, and I put it away because I didn't really have any idea how to get a book published. But she found it like 10 years ago. She liked it, so she went out and bought this package with iUniverse. You have to pay for it. And so she wanted to publish that book, and I said, I went back and read it, and I said, this book is too outdated, and there's nothing in it that people can relate to today. So I said, I'll write a different book for you, since you've already purchased this package. And that's how I actually got into this. My daughter, she got me in it. Uh-huh. And so I wrote this book called The Great American Novel. She had it published. And so I thought, hey, that wasn't too bad. Maybe I'll give this another try. So I went back to the Hung Jury, and I rewrote it, and I submitted it to this publisher in Florida, and they took it. And so based on that, I thought, okay, I can do this. And so I started in on the next book, and then the next book, and so that's how more or less that I got started. But in publishing, you used to have to make a hard copy of it and send it out to all these publishers. Well, now you can do it with your computer. You just find these publishers, and some of them have open submissions, and others have closed submissions, but they've all got standards that you have to go by. Some of them you have to write a query letter and send it off, and they'll contact you whether they're interested in the rest of the book or not. And some of them will take the whole manuscript, and they'll analyze it and see if they want it, if it fits into their program. And I sent both of my books out probably to 50 or 60 different publishers, and I got word back from a number of them, but most of them were trying to reel me in to get me to, in a situation where I buy my own books. But and I didn't go for that. But the Beacon Publishing Group, I researched everything about them, couldn't find a bad word on the internet, and so I sent them the rest of my book, and they sent me a contract on it, and I signed it. And then the next one, when I finished with it, I sent it off, and they sent me a contract back for it. And I always thought that the Great American Novel was really personal to me, but it was self-published, and that's just like putting it in a coffin and burying it in the ground, to be self-published. Uh-huh. So I submitted it to Beacon Publishing Company too, and they're going to republish it. So I've got 2 contracts with them that are going to come out and within a year. So I'm going to have both those published too. Now,
the new book that you...
The Road to Floradixie?
Yeah, well, and its sequel. Is it fair to ask the theme of that?
The next book that will be published is called 18 Missing Pages. And the plot is that there are 2 guys that are really down on... Everybody in my books is flawed, if you haven't noticed.
Because you worked with a lot of flawed people in your career.
I think everybody's flawed in one way or another.
You bet.
Well, everybody except Judy.
Yep. But these 2 guys, they're flawed, are down on their luck. They're having problems, and they go to Washington, D.C. on a temporary job of tearing down old buildings that don't fit in these historic neighborhoods, and to get them out of there, and to help restore, to gut these buildings and restore these historical sites. And in the process, they're tearing out walls, and they come across a satchel with 18 pages in it, and on the outside of the satchel, it's got the name Edward Stanton on it. And so they don't want to... One of them is real conscientious. He doesn't want to open it up because he thinks there's something in there that's going to change history. And so it goes from there, and the New Jersey mob finds out that they've got it through a situation. They want it because they think they think that it's going to be really, really valuable. And from that point on, these flawed mobsters who are like things out of the past, they're over the hill. None of them are, in with the new mob, the technology and stuff that goes on, and these guys are like out of their element. They don't know anything either, and it's what develops out of that. The story comes about as to how these people pursue these guys, their reaction, and then it's got a kind of a unique ending to it. So, but it'll be out within a year. 18 Missing Pages is the name of that.
Well, we'll look forward to that for sure.
Yeah, 648. No, that's all right. 648-5510. Our guest this morning, Mr. Tom Brewster. We say author. I say author of note here in Lincoln, Logan County. We're proud to have him. He's a doggone good writer. You may have some questions of Tom or some comments. Maybe somebody's read The Road to Floradixie. We appreciate your input on that. I asked a question earlier if you had any retail book outlets downtown. It's a shame. Such places of that have kind of been falling off because of the e-trade, people buying on the internet. Gordy, there used to be a place I went to in Chicago. Anytime I go to Chicago, I made a pilgrimage there. It was called Crocs and Brentano's, and it was a magnificent old bookstore. Good old folks running around all bent over, but they knew exactly where each and every book was. You go and ask about it. Oh yeah, that's over here, and they'd follow them and show anyway. Anyway, it was it was an adventure to go there, and I got to know the owner, Carl Croc, quite well. And boy, it always cost me money to go to Chicago because I'd come home with a bunch of books.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of an outlet. I wonder is Barnes & Noble still a viable retail outlet? Always a great spot to go and have a cup of coffee with them and browsing some of their books. Tom Brewster, The Road to Floradixie. Interesting story. And it's interesting how Tom got into the writing business. His chief of police when Tom was on the police force here, because of the state's attorney didn't like the reports the boys were writing, and the chief decided they needed a little refinement. So I sent him to Lincoln College. Now there's another good example of why Lincoln College is important to our community. It created an author of note for us.
That's
so
right.
In any event, that's been a great experience for you. And you have another book on the market, or not on the market, but out there floating around between the left and the right ear somewhere. And you say it takes about a year to get a book published.
It does, even after they signed the contract with that stipulated in it that they're not going to have it. They're going to have it within a year, but they say that they will have it within a year, and it almost takes a year. I mean, I just submitted the other one a couple of months ago, and they sent me a contract, and I signed on it. I don't remember the date exactly, but I don't look for it to be out until, at least next summer, because that's the way it's been so far with every book I've written. It takes a long time to get them out.
I'm not asking private information, but is there a set royalty, or is there kind of a floating figure in the royalty figures there?
Well, the producers, publishers I've had, they do, your percentage is lower for the first $5,000 that they take in, and then it increases after that by the sales, because
based on dollar value.
They want to pay for their,
sure,
for what their investment is.
It's called business.
I don't blame them for that at all. And I'm not Stephen King or Grisham or anyone like that. I can't negotiate and say, hey, I got to have more money because nobody knows me and I'm not, that well known. So
well, you can't say nobody knows you. We know you, don't we, Jim and Bill?
Well, Jim can write a good report for you.
Yeah.
And he's an important guy in the county. So.
Well, I appreciate all that you guys did.
You say your wife actually could do this quite well if she decided to.
Oh, she could write like a genius. I'm serious, and whenever I write a book, I give it to her, and I say, okay, tell me, and I've got a practice. She writes at least a paragraph of her own doing into the book. I won't say which ones they are, but she always writes a paragraph into a book, and she'll tell me, this needs to be changed, this is not good. But if she sat down and wrote a book, I can't tell you how good it would be, but she's very shy, and she doesn't want anybody to know what her emotions are, and so I've tried to talk her into writing, but she's not going to go there.
Well,
You
writing
can
is a
probably
gift.
outguess her after 50 years of marriage, huh?
Not really.
I don't think so.
You're going to cop that plea, all right. Well, writing is writing cogently and writing for the pleasure of other people. That's a gift. And I really not everybody can just sit down and start writing just because they think they know a lot of things, or maybe they don't know so much at all. But putting together a story of fiction, it's one thing to write about facts. The other thing is to create a story about fiction. And that's what I think you do very well. The other book was based on facts that you knew a lot about.
Well, it was a scenario that I wrote about the characters in the hung jury, and there was a progression of events that I wrote about, the progression of the events. Mm-hmm. William Maxwell did the same thing. He was from here in Lincoln. He's world renowned. Mm-hmm. But I wrote it on a series of events, but not particularly the way that it played out. I wrote it fictionalized every event that was in it, but there was a chronology that I went by that was based pretty much on the situation here in Lincoln that almost everybody knows about.
Bill Maxwell was a reviewer of books, and methinks that you probably he'd come off pretty good with Bill Maxwell's review.
Yes.
Bill was an incisive writer, brilliant man. The interesting thing about that is everybody knows, has ever heard Bill Maxwell, he thought a lot of his home community, and he wrote well about it.
He did.
And we always come off pretty good with the books that he had written about Lincoln, Logan County.
Well, I've read So Long, See You Tomorrow probably 3 or 4 times, and I thought that was a great book, and I liked
They're
everything
fun
about
reads,
it.
aren't they? Because
They are, exactly.
I try to guess which house it is on Park Place that he's talking about, and which house it is on Elm Street that he's talking about.
I think it's marked on 9th Street where he lived.
Yeah, he did. He lived on 9th Street. But one of the people that he wrote about built my house back in 26, I think.
Atlases?
Well, you got a new house
No,
for the
no,
neighborhood.
Jacobs. Julius Jacobs.
Julius Jacobs, right, yeah.
You got a new house for our neighborhood.
Yeah, I live in the old part, don't I? Don't we?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't trade it my house for anything.
Tom, do you find in writing, you're on chapter 22 and things are flowing along nicely, and suddenly there's a dearth of action coming out of your mind, and you draw a blank. Does that ever happen?
Well, I read about writer's block and all of that. I don't think I have that. I mean, because I'll just go back to some situation that I remember in time and think if I was writing about, a call that I answered somewhere, how would I start? And I just think, well, I want to get to this point, so I just say, well, I got to write to that point. And sometimes it is hard to just sit down and start writing and be able to keep your concentration and go through it, but I've never had any problem with a writer's block. I guess coming to this situation in the book that I'm trying to write now, where I can't get my characters out of a bad situation without making them look like awful people, might be a writer's block, but I don't think so. I think I just wandered into a situation that I can't solve in the book, so I'm going to have to go back maybe several chapters and rewrite it to keep them out of trouble.
In the road to Floradixie, did you find yourself inserting yourself and your experiences in these two nice retired policemen?
Well, I try not to inject my personality into any of it because think I'm that interesting.
I think you're pretty interesting.
I try to think about some other people or some other situation rather than me, because, like I said, I really don't believe I'm that interesting and to write about. So I try to write about somebody else's personality.
Well, Tom Brewster as an individual might fulfill that description you just gave, but Tom Brewster as the author, that's not so. You're a very interesting fellow, and you know how to craft words. Crafting words, even just writing a good letter, is an art into itself. Grammatics, very important to me, because I had a couple of really tough English teachers in grade school, not only in high school, but in grade school, and I remember them well. Well, thank goodness I had them, because they, here at my age, which is getting along there, I still find writing fun, and I still find myself going to the dictionary to check my spelling. I do that often on my computer to make sure. And sure enough, the word "if" hasn't changed.
Well, lucky for us.
Luckily, my computer will correct my spelling for me.
The business of putting words to paper or to a keyboard is a craft in and of itself. And I think people who enjoy writing and write better, they're more satisfied.
I think so. My wife's asked me, why would you want to be famous? And I really don't want to be famous, but I do want people to appreciate what I write. I like to put my work. It's like anything. If you're a carpenter and you build a perfectly straight corner and your walls are perfectly straight and you build something beautiful, you really do want people to say, man, you really did a good job on that.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, so when I write, I really don't care about being famous and, going all over the place and people wanting my autograph and stuff like that.
Well, you're the most famous guy on Tremont Street.
But I do appreciate it when people like what I write. I mean, it's a compliment when somebody tells me, hey, I really like the way you wrote that book. I mean, I like that.
Oh, and I bet you hear that right along.
I do, but, I told my wife once, I said, nobody's ever told me that they didn't like it. She said, well, if they didn't like it, they're not going to tell you.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you are. That's the bottom line on it. If it was so, you won't hear anything from them. I was enthused when I put your book down about your crafting of the words. The way, it wasn't necessarily the story, but the way you wrote the story.
But the story was good too.
Well, the story was interesting. It was different. But I appreciate anybody who can take 10 words and build a good sentence. And there's a craft to that. And so Lincoln College must have imparted something extra to you, sir.
Well,
do you remember who your instructor was at that time?
I don't. Because this was...
Who could have been there at that time?
35, 38 years ago, something like that. So I can't. I tried to remember because I wanted to ask you about what happened to that guy, but I couldn't come up with his name.
But as you think back, did teachers that you had in high school as well as college affect the way you think about words in the English language and telling your tale?
Not really. I mean, I'd like to be able to say, I had a teacher that told me that they thought that I could write, but I might have told you the story about I saw my math teacher like 10 years after high school, and I was on the Lincoln Police Department, and she said, Tommy, what are you up to these days? And I said, I'm a policeman in Lincoln, Illinois. And she said, well, I kind of thought you'd be on the other side of the law.
Was she teasing you, I hope?
And the same to the horse you rode in on.
In a way she was, but she didn't really think that I would, excel on the other side of the picture. She sort of thought I was a disruptive student, which
You've got a couple
I
of
was.
minutes left. You got a couple of minutes left if you need to make a comment, or just say hello to Tom. 648-5510. Tom Brewster, author. By the way, next time I come to your door, I want to be met with a Tom and Jerry.
Because that was the party house back in the day, right?
In the old days, the owner of that house always had a Christmas holiday. It was on Christmas Day, and I was too young. But my folks walked around the corner and they'd had a Tom and Jerry. That was the habit of those days. And they'd have one and they'd go home. So you're living in a kind of a storied house there.
Yeah. Well,
648-5510. Tom, you got another. How long will it be before you get this next book on the road? About a year?
it'll be about a year, I think. Probably in the middle of next summer or next fall.
I hope I'm around to read it.
And its title is?
18 Missing Pages.
Right.
18 missing pages.
And
Well,
the
we'll
title
wait
of this
for
one
that.
is The Road to Floradixie, and then
Yeah, he comes
the
up
other
with kind of
was
unique
Hung Jerry.
titles for his books,
Yeah.
too. Anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate your taking your time with us, Tom. This is farm season, and our farm friends have heavy equipment on the highways. Give them a chance. Look ahead. Drive ahead of yourselves. Thank you very much for Viewpoint.